Hey there guys, and welcome back to the channel. I hope you all had a fantastic Christmas with great presents, great food, had a great time with family and friends, but we're back and we're going to get back into our movie news here. So we're going to be talking about the Sony Spider-Man spin-off movies, Madam Web, Morbius, Kraven, the Venom films, all that kind of good stuff. And it looks like Sony Pictures CEO has recently came out and made some ridiculous comments that these movies are not actually that bad, that it's the critics' fault as to why they flopped. Not that the audience didn't like the movies. The CEO has come out from Sony Pictures and basically just blamed the critics wholeheartedly. That's why these movies flopped, not because of the quality, but because of the critics. So this is kind of a crazy story, and the statements from the CEO of Sony Pictures here is so ridiculous. Let's get into this story, let's break down the details, and let's see what the CEO of Sony Pictures had to say for himself. So this comes to us from comicbookmovie.com. Sony Pictures CEO blames critics for Madam Web and Kraven flopping. These are not terrible films. That's what he had to say. So when it comes to the Sony Spider-Man spin-off movies, the Venom movies were actually quite well received. Most people liked the Venom films. Okay, Venom Let There Be Carnage, that was a bit of a disappointment in my book, but there was still some enjoyment to be had with those movies, and they were much better than Madam Web, Kraven, Morbius. Those movies were so bad quality. The critics hated it, the audience hated it, it flopped financially at the worldwide box office, and those movies, wow, just so badly received. But let's go down, like I said, and let's see what the CEO had to say here. So, there might be still some life in the Sony Pictures Spider-Man universe. The franchise will be getting a major overhaul at the very least, following the abysmal box office performance of the latest Spider-Man-less Spider-Man spin-off, Kraven the Hunter. I'd literally been looking forward to Kraven the Hunter. I think the marketing actually looked good. The trailers, the R-ratedness, the grittiness, that scene where he's inside the Jeep and he bites the guy's nose off. It was R-rated. It looked absolutely like carnage. No pun intended. Yeah, it just looked bloody, gritty, R-rated, action-packed. And I was so looking forward to Kraven. But man, it's probably the worst one of the lot. Like, it's so bad. And because of my excitement was at a higher point than Madam Web and Morbius, I actually feel more disappointed when it comes to Kraven. Plus, having Aaron Taylor Johnson in there as well. He's such a great actor. And that movie was just a massive letdown. So, we're not sure how much any new take on the Spider-Man spin-off universe would actually be improved. However, it doesn't sound like the studio CEO is willing to admit that the quality of the films has anything to do with them flopping at the box office. Yeah, he doesn't want to admit that the quality's bad. He's come out and said that it's because of the critics. That's like me trying to sell a used car that has no tyres, no steering wheel, and a broken engine, and me being like, no, it's not the quality of the car, it's just the critics are saying my car is bad. It's not the actual quality of the car. Don't look at the quality of the car, it's not that. The critics are just being mean about my car. That's why nobody wants to buy it. That's basically what he was saying. And it's just crazy. Oh, it's not that the films are bad. Don't look at the quality of the films. They're not bad. Critics are just being mean about the films. That's why nobody went to watch them. Like, this guy is just living in fairyland, and it's just absolutely insane. So, while speaking to the Los Angeles Times, Sony Pictures CEO Tony Vinciquerra admitted that the Kraven is probably the worst launch we've had in the nearly 8 years he's been at the studio. Probably the worst launch we've had. Wow. So in the 8 years he's been there. In the nearly 8 years he's been at the studio, quote, I still don't understand, he added, because the film is not that bad. Ultimately, he's right to have his opinion about a movie. Movies are subjective. They hit people in different ways. So maybe he thought the movie was good, whereas the majority of the critics and audience didn't. But, when overwhelmingly the critics and audiences hate your movie, then I think your opinion may be wrong about the movie. Obviously, he's biased as well because he runs the company that produced the movie. So, make of that what you will. So, moving on to this, the movie's 15% Rotten Tomatoes score would suggest the majority of critics would disagree. Remember his quote here, I still don't understand because the film is not that bad. And 15% would suggest the majority of critics would disagree. That's when talking about Kraven. So, if we pull up the actual chart here showing the Rotten Tomatoes score for the Sony Spider-Man universe movies, the highest one comes in at 58% for Venom Let There Be Carnage, and the lowest, Madam Web, comes in at 11%. Let's just do a rundown of these movies. So, Venom Let There Be Carnage, 58%. Venom The Last Dance, 41%. The first Venom movie at 30%. Kraven, which it says in this article was at 15%, but it's now at 16%. Now it's been updated. Morbius sits at 15%, and then Madam Web again at the lowest 11%. So not one fresh Rotten Tomatoes score for any of their Sony Spider-Man universe movies. That tells you right there that they're not doing, they're not doing justice by these characters or these movies. The critics hate it. The audience scores aren't much better either, and ultimately the box office is what matters when it comes to making movies. That's what they're there for, to be a business, to make movies. The box office just absolutely flopped. The reputation of the studio has gone downhill, and ultimately, whether Kraven ended up being good or not, I still said that even if Kraven came out to be a good movie, people still wouldn't watch it because the confidence in the movie-going audience has just been lost when it comes to these Sony Spider-Man movies. And ultimately, I hope it doesn't have a knock-on effect to the next Spider-Man movie as well. But anyway, going back to the article here. So, the Spider-Man films aside, none of the studio's live-action Marvel-based movies were hits with the critics, although the first two Venom films were a box office success, and the recent The Last Dance performed a lot better than Kraven, Morbius, and Madam Web. Yeah, people have always had a soft spot in their heart when it comes to the Venom movies. The Venom character, because he has such close ties to Spider-Man, he's basically Spider-Man's arch nemesis, and a lot of people watch these Venom films hoping that Spider-Man's going to pop up or there's going to be some major sort of connective tissue to the Spider-Man franchise. That's what intrigues a lot of people. But it's not just that. I mean, like Tom Hardy as Venom, he's just such a great actor and he plays that role so well and he's become a fan favorite. And it's a shame that he's not coming back to make any more movies. Although I do think there's a possibility that he will pop up in Avengers Doomsday or Secret Wars. I think he will be in that at some point. But anyway, yeah, so it's a shame. This universe could have been something great, and ultimately it just tanked. But the Sony Pictures CEO, he went on to say the following here in a bit of a statement. So, quote, "Let's just touch on Madam Web for a moment," Vince Aquara continued. "Madam Web underperformed in theaters because the press just crucified it. It was not a bad film." What? And it did great on Netflix. Yeah, because that's the metric we're going to measure when it comes to box office now. Don't worry about the box office revenue or making any money. If it lands on Netflix and is popular, that's great. For some reason, the press decided that they didn't want us making these films out of Kraven and Madam Web, and the critics just destroyed them. They also did it with Venom, but the audience loved Venom and made Venom a massive hit. These are not terrible films, they were just destroyed by critics in the press for some reason. So, they also did it with Venom. So he's saying the critics also destroyed Venom. But then why did the audience turn out for Venom, but not turn out for the other movies, Morbius, Madam Web, and Kraven? That's because those movies were absolutely god-awful and terrible. And the Venom movies, even though they're not perfect movies, the Venom movies, there's still a lot of enjoyment to be found with those Venom movies. And unfortunately, the same can't really be said for the other Sony Spider-Man universe movies. But this CEO comment here is just absolutely ridiculous, saying that the critics destroyed these movies and that's why nobody went to see them. Well then, why do people turn up for the Venom movies but not turn up for the other movies? That's what doesn't make sense. He doesn't want to talk about the quality. He should have come out with a statement and said, guys, I realize that the quality hasn't been there. We absolutely regret that the quality hasn't been up to the standard that we expect. Going forward, we're going to take our time. We're not going to rush out these movies. We're going to make sure the quality is at a higher bar, and we're going to try and do justice by these characters. That's the kind of statement he should have said, but instead he just said, don't worry about the quality of our movies. It's not our fault. It's the critics. It's all their fault. They made our movies bomb. They made sure that the audience didn't turn up, even though they turned up for Venom, which doesn't make sense. So ultimately, this guy's just living in a fairyland, and the fact that this guy is the CEO of Sony Pictures worries me. And the fact that he hasn't discussed the quality or made comments about improving the quality of these movies, that means going forward, they're going to continue to just pump out this crap. They're not going to change the quality. And ultimately, this comment doesn't instill any confidence in me as a movie fan when it comes to Sony movies. And I'm sure it's probably going to be the same for you guys. But just absolutely ridiculous comments. Nothing here about improving the quality. Nothing about, that they've done wrong, that they need to improve it. It's just crazy. So Vince Aquara is obviously entitled to his opinion, but it seems a little short-sighted and stubborn not to at least acknowledge the possibility that the critics and audiences didn't like the movies because they're not very good. Absolutely. Sony insiders have said that the studio will be more discerning about which, if any, of the studio's stable of Spider-Man characters should be elevated into their own movie franchises, but Vince Aquara clearly believes critics are biased towards these movies and wouldn't give any future Spider-Man spin-off universe installments a fair shake. I think this is absolute nonsense. You know, when a movie comes out and it bombs and they blame people for being racist and, you know, bigots and all this kind of stuff, and now this CEO has come out and blaming the critics and the press for smashing these movies. That's why audiences didn't turn up. It's always someone else's fault. It's never the studio's fault. They never sort of take it on the chin and say, you know, we're going to improve quality, we're going to do better in the future. You know, please trust us with the future installments, they're going to be better. It's always somebody else's fault. And when you hear comments like this, like I say, it just doesn't instill any confidence in the future of the Sony Spider-Man spin-off movies, if they actually do any more of these movies, which I'm not sure they are at this point. But guys, that's kind of where we are. That's the Sony Pictures CEO there making comments about the critics destroying the films. Nothing to do with the quality, not addressing the quality whatsoever. And obviously these movies are bad. He knows they're bad, but he's probably just not addressing it. He's either not addressing it because he doesn't want to, or he's living in a fairyland and believes these movies are actually good. Well, I suppose that's what he said in the comment. He said that the movies are good, but the critics destroyed it. So the guy seems a bit, yeah, not in the real world, not living the life of a real movie fan, or he's just not in the real world, doesn't understand what's going on in the cinematic landscape when it comes to the Sony Spider-Man universe movies. But guys, I throw it off to you. What do you think about the CEO's comments here regarding these movies of, you know, Morbius, Madam Web, Kraven, and the Venom movies? Do you think he was right? Do you think he was wrong? Do you think the guy's living in cuckoo land? I would love to hear your thoughts and input here, guys. So jump into the comment section and let me know what you think about this story. As always, guys, thanks so much for being here. Hit that like and become a subscriber if you haven't already. It goes a long way to supporting the content, so I'd really, really appreciate that. And as always, I will see you in the next video.